It was a really hard week of the wedding, and she was upset about something, but she owned it and she apologized and she brought me flowers and a note apologizing. What was hard to get over was being blamed for something that not only I didn't do, but that happened to me, and the people who were part of our wedding going to our comms team and saying, I know this didn't happen.
What if the story that defined Meghan Markle's victimhood was built on a lie? What if the single moment that made the world turn against Kate Middleton was, in reality, a fabrication designed to manipulate sympathy? That's the uncomfortable question at the heart of Meghan Markle's recent confession, one that is already shaking the very foundations of the royal family's narrative. She has admitted what millions suspected but never dared to say aloud. It wasn't Kate who made Meghan cry before the royal wedding. It was Meghan who made Kate cry. Let that sink in for a second. This isn't just a detail. This isn't just a minor correction of a royal anecdote.
What was hard to get over was being blamed for something that not only I didn't do, but that happened to me.
This was the cornerstone of Meghan's Oprah Winfrey interview. The carefully crafted image of a young duchess bullied and disrespected by her sister-in-law, framed as a symbol of how the royal machine chewed her up and spat her out. Meghan used that story to make the world see her as fragile, persecuted, misunderstood. And now? Now she says it was false. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. So, what does that tell us about Meghan? What does it tell us about the royal family? And perhaps the most chilling question of all, if she lied about this, what else might have been fabricated? Imagine the millions of people watching Oprah that night, hanging on every word. Gasps in living rooms across America. Outrage in newspapers the next morning. Kate Middleton, poised, graceful, the future queen, suddenly painted as a cold-hearted woman who reduced Meghan to tears over a child's dress. A bridesmaid dress. A moment so ordinary it became extraordinary in Meghan's telling. And yet, in that moment, the world chose sides. And now Meghan admits it was all upside down.
It made me cry, and it really hurt my feelings. And I thought, in the context of everything else that was going on in those days leading to the wedding, that it didn't make sense to not be just doing what everyone else was doing, which was trying to be supportive, knowing what was going on with my dad and whatnot.
Why does this matter right now? Because timing is everything. Meghan didn't come forward years ago, when the heat was at its peak. She didn't correct the record when Kate was being vilified online, when hashtags accusing the future Princess of Wales of cruelty were trending. No, she waited. She waited until the walls began to close in, until the cracks in her narrative became impossible to ignore. So what forced her to speak now? Was it guilt? Pressure from inside the palace? Was it Harry, tired of carrying the burden of defending her? Or was it the looming threat of exposure from someone else? Someone ready to spill the truth before Meghan could spin it? You have to ask yourself, why would Meghan voluntarily dismantle one of her most powerful weapons? She built her reputation on that Oprah confession. She secured interviews, Netflix deals, book deals, all while projecting herself as the wrong duchess. And with one confession, she burns it all to the ground. Unless this isn't a confession born of guilt at all. Unless this is another strategy. Another carefully staged move. Another attempt to control the narrative before it controls her.
I think it's really important for people to understand the truth. I would hope that she would have wanted that corrected. And maybe in the same way that the palace wouldn't let anybody else negate it, they wouldn't let her, because she's a good person. And I think so much of what I have seen play out is this idea of polarity, where if you love me, you don't have to hate her. And if you love her, you don't need to hate me.
Think about the mechanics of lying. The first lie always buys you time. The second one buys you sympathy. But when the cracks show, when the contradictions pile up, the liar has a choice: double down or confess. Both are performances. Both are designed not to reveal the truth, but to manage perception. And Meghan? She has always been a master of perception. Picture Kate, silent all these years, refusing to fire back, never contradicting Meghan's Oprah version. A woman told by the palace to remain dignified, even while the world pointed fingers at her. How must it feel now, watching the world discover the truth, that it was Kate who cried at her daughter Charlotte's bridesmaid dress fitting, not Meghan? That she carried the wound in silence while Meghan profited from the fiction? And here's the emotional gut punch. Kate's silence wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was discipline. It was a gamble that the truth would one day emerge without her needing to lift a finger.
The reverse happened.
And that day has finally come. But don't think for a second this revelation is just about a dress. No, this is about credibility, about character, about whether Meghan Markle can ever again be believed when she claims to be a victim of the monarchy. If she fabricated the Charlotte dress story, what about the stories of racist conversations? What about the claims of neglect when she struggled with mental health? What about the suggestion that the royal family deliberately silenced her? This isn't just about the past. It's about the future. The confession shifts everything. It creates a domino effect. Netflix executives suddenly nervous. Publishers second-guessing her memoirs. PR teams scrambling to control the spin. And behind closed doors in the palaces of London, whispers growing louder. If Meghan has finally admitted this, what else might she eventually have to admit? And Harry? Where does this leave him? The man who once said, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets." The man who sat by her side in the Oprah interview, nodding in solemn agreement as she recounted the supposed cruelty of Kate. If he knew the truth, his credibility collapses alongside hers. If he didn't, then Meghan deceived him too. Which is worse? The stakes couldn't be higher. And let's not forget the irony here. Meghan once framed herself as a truth-teller, a whistleblower against royal cruelty. It's time to tell everything, she now says. But the problem with truth is that once you begin to reveal it, you can't stop halfway. You can't choose which truths to tell and which lies to bury, because the world will start digging. And that's exactly what's happening now. For the first time, Meghan has admitted she was not the victim in the bridesmaid dress saga. But what else has she misrepresented? And how far back does the trail of contradictions go? Was this just the crack in the dam? Or the beginning of a flood that will wash away everything she's built? Because here's the cliffhanger no one saw coming. Meghan's confession may have been her attempt to control the story, but in reality, she may have just lost control forever. And what happens next? Well, that's where the story takes a turn that no one, not even Meghan herself, saw coming. Remember that night in March 2021? The air was electric. Millions across the globe were glued to their screens, waiting for Meghan Markle and Prince Harry to finally tell their side of the story. And then, there she was, Meghan, sitting opposite Oprah, framed by that lush Californian garden backdrop, looking vulnerable yet defiant. She leaned forward, lowered her voice, and dropped a bombshell that would dominate headlines for weeks. Actually, she said, the reverse happened. Do you remember the shock of that moment? In one sentence, Meghan rewrote history. She told Oprah and the world that it wasn't she who made Kate Middleton cry in the lead-up to her royal wedding. It was Kate who made her cry. Pause on that. Think about the power of that statement. At that moment, Meghan cast herself as the wounded bride-to-be, a woman mistreated by the future Queen of England. And Kate? She was rebranded in an instant as the cold, callous sister-in-law who left Meghan in tears over a child's dress. It was perfect television, perfect drama, perfect victimhood. But here's the unsettling part. Meghan knew exactly what she was doing. Because the Oprah interview wasn't just a conversation, it was a performance. The set was carefully chosen to look serene, intimate, almost Eden-like, as though the couple were bearing their souls in a safe haven away from royal oppression. Oprah, the queen of confessional television, leaned in with empathetic eyes. The audience leaned in with her. And when Meghan revealed that infamous bridesmaid dress story, you could almost hear the collective gasp echo around the world. Headlines exploded the next morning. Kate made Meghan cry. Social media erupted. Hashtags trended. Kate was dragged through the mud without ever uttering a word. Overnight, she became the villain in Meghan's fairy tale of oppression. But let's ask the uncomfortable question. Why this story? Why this detail? Out of all the moments Meghan could have chosen to illustrate her pain, why did she zero in on Princess Charlotte's bridesmaid dress? Because it was small, intimate, relatable. Who hasn't seen a child cry at a wedding? Who hasn't witnessed tension over outfits, family disputes, misunderstandings before a big day? Meghan's choice was strategic. It was an anecdote that ordinary people could instantly connect with. And in her telling, she was the vulnerable one, reduced to tears by a woman who should have been her ally. That was the genius of it. And Harry? He sat beside her, silent but affirming. His body language spoke volumes. Arms crossed at times, jaw tight, eyes heavy with resentment. He was there to lend credibility to Meghan's story, to embody the wounded husband protecting his wife. He never contradicted her. He never hesitated. And why would he? The narrative worked. But let's step back. Was it true? Meghan framed her version as a revelation. Actually, the reverse happened. But think carefully about those words. She wasn't just correcting the record. She was flipping it. She wasn't saying, it was complicated, or there were misunderstandings. She presented her version as fact, as gospel, as the hidden truth that only now could be revealed. And the world believed her. Or at least, they wanted to. Because by then, Meghan had built herself into a symbol. The outsider who had dared to marry into the world's most rigid monarchy. The woman of color who had endured racism, cruelty, and neglect. People were ready to believe she had been mistreated because her narrative fit into a larger picture that resonated globally. Kate, by contrast, was the perfect foil, the privileged, polished princess, untouchable and reserved. Who was the audience more likely to empathize with? The Hollywood actress crying to Oprah, or the royal who never speaks? Meghan knew the answer, and she played it. Now, fast forward to today, when Meghan admits the truth. She confesses that it wasn't Kate who made her cry. It was she who reduced Kate to tears. Suddenly, the Oprah interview looks different. The carefully staged vulnerability begins to unravel. And you have to wonder, was the world fooled by an actress's best performance? Consider this. Meghan's revelation to Oprah wasn't spontaneous. Nothing in that interview was. Oprah herself admitted that months of preparation went into it. Questions were chosen. Narratives were crafted. Meghan had every opportunity to correct the record. Instead, she weaponized the Charlotte bridesmaid dress story to maximize sympathy. And that's why this moment matters so much. Because it wasn't just a harmless exaggeration. It wasn't just a misunderstanding of who cried first. It was a deliberate reframing of reality. And for years, it stood unchallenged. But here's where things get really interesting. Even back in 2021, whispers were already emerging that Meghan's version didn't add up. Journalists began pointing out inconsistencies. Palace insiders hinted that Meghan had twisted the truth. There were suggestions that Kate had been the one in tears, devastated by Meghan's harshness during the dress fitting. But those whispers were drowned out by Meghan's louder, glossier version, broadcast to millions. Why? Because scandal sells. Because victimhood is magnetic. Because once Oprah endorsed Meghan's narrative, it became untouchable. Until now. Now, with Meghan's confession, we're forced to revisit that night in 2021 with new eyes. To see not a vulnerable duchess bravely speaking truth to power, but a woman carefully constructing a narrative that served her interests. A narrative she knew would damage Kate, shield herself, and reinforce the idea that she was always the wronged party. Think about it. If Meghan had admitted back then that she had made Kate cry, the entire interview would have shifted. Sympathy would have drained away. Questions would have turned back on her. The press would have asked, if she exaggerated this, what else did she exaggerate? The public would have wondered, can we really trust her? That's why she couldn't tell the truth. Not then. Not when she needed the world's sympathy most. But the truth has a funny way of surfacing. Lies are fragile things. They crack under pressure. They crumble under scrutiny. And Meghan's bridesmaid dress story has finally collapsed. The question is, why admit it now? What has changed? Because when Meghan said to Oprah, actually, the reverse happened, she wasn't just attacking Kate. She was rewriting her own legacy. That story became part of her mythology. It was the moment she cemented herself as the victim hero of the royal saga. And yet now, years later, she admits it was false. Which leads us to the next question, the one that will haunt Meghan for years to come. If she lied about this, what else has she lied about? Because this bridesmaid dress confession isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of an unraveling. And what comes next will expose far more than a single tear-streaked misunderstanding. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle was meant to be a fairy tale. A global spectacle watched by millions. A union of Hollywood glamour and royal tradition. A modern love story designed to signal the monarchy's evolution into the 21st century. But behind the polished smiles and golden carriages, there were shadows. And at the heart of those shadows, one story refused to die: the infamous bridesmaid dress incident involving Princess Charlotte. The headlines painted it as a clash between two women: Meghan, the outspoken newcomer, and Kate, the poised future queen. But what really happened in those final, frantic days before the wedding? Why did something as simple as a flower girl's dress ignite such bitterness that it still reverberates years later? Let's step into those days, shall we? Picture Windsor in May 2018. The castle grounds are buzzing with activity: florists, caterers, musicians, security teams. The eyes of the world are fixed on Meghan Markle, the American actress about to marry into the House of Windsor. The pressure is immense. Every detail scrutinized, every expression photographed. Meghan is not just preparing for a wedding. She is preparing for history. Now imagine the tension building behind closed doors. Meghan's standards are exacting. She wants perfection. The dresses for the bridesmaids, Kate's daughter Charlotte among them, are crucial. They must fit perfectly. They must look flawless. But when the fittings take place, something goes wrong. Reports suggest that Charlotte was upset. The little princess, sensitive and shy, found herself overwhelmed by the dress situation. Perhaps the fit was off. Perhaps the design wasn't comfortable. Small things, but magnified under the weight of a royal wedding. Kate, protective as ever, raised concerns. She wanted adjustments, alterations. She wanted her daughter to feel comfortable, even if it meant going against Meghan's vision. And here's where the clash ignited. For Meghan, every detail was a reflection of her. This was her day, her story. She needed control. For Kate, it was about Charlotte, her child, who deserved to be shielded from unnecessary stress. Two women, two priorities, both reasonable, yet colliding head-on. But Meghan's reaction, according to insiders, was not calm negotiation. It was harsh. Sharp words were exchanged. Tone escalated. And suddenly, what began as a discussion about a child's dress turned into an emotional standoff. Kate, known for her composure, was reduced to tears. Meghan's words, her demands, struck too hard, too fast. This was the moment everything spiraled out of control. Because once emotions flared, the damage was done. Kate left the encounter shaken, upset, tearful. Meghan, too, may have felt frustrated and cornered, but the power imbalance was undeniable. Kate was humiliated. Now think about this. How did such a private moment leak to the press in the first place? Someone inside the palace whispered. Someone told reporters that Kate had been left in tears after a bridesmaid dress fitting. And for a brief time, that was the accepted story. Kate was the one who cried. Meghan was the one who caused it. But then came Meghan's Oprah interview. Her chance to flip the script. She told the world the opposite. Actually, the reverse happened. Suddenly, Kate was recast as the aggressor. Meghan became the victim. The world, desperate for drama, swallowed it whole. And yet, Meghan's recent confession flips the story back to its original version. She admits now what palace aides had long whispered, that it was she who made Kate cry, not the other way around. Which means the tension during those wedding preparations was not a case of Meghan being bullied, but a case of Meghan exerting pressure and crossing a line. Let's pause here. Ask yourself, what does this reveal about Meghan's mindset at that time? Was it simply wedding stress? Was it perfectionism gone too far? Or was it something deeper, a need to dominate, to assert herself in an environment where she felt she had no control? And what about Kate? What did that moment teach her? She was about to gain a sister-in-law who, instead of bonding over shared struggles, instead of finding solidarity in the face of royal pressures, had chosen to cut her down. No wonder their relationship never recovered. Here's the irony. Both women were under enormous pressure. Meghan, a foreigner entering a centuries-old institution. Kate, balancing her role as a mother, wife to the future king, and the family's steady hand. They could have been allies. Instead, that dress became a battlefield. And when Meghan later weaponized that moment in front of Oprah, it became more than a personal rift. It became a cultural flashpoint. The story of the crying bride was no longer about Charlotte's dress. It was about truth, lies, and manipulation on a royal stage. Which brings us to the deeper question. If Meghan was willing to twist such a small, private dispute into global ammunition, what does that say about her approach to larger conflicts with the royal family? Because if a bridesmaid's dress could cause this level of destruction, imagine what was happening behind the palace walls on issues far more consequential than hems and stitches. And this, right here, is why the bridesmaid dress story still matters. It wasn't just about fabric and fittings. It was the spark that revealed fault lines destined to explode. But Meghan wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Because what came after the tears, after the silence, after the whispers, was the deliberate construction of a narrative that would change the world's perception of Kate Middleton forever. And that's where the next chapter begins. Why lie? Why take a story that, on the surface, seemed so trivial, a child's dress, a private moment between two women, and twist it into a weapon on the world stage? That's the question that hangs over Meghan Markle's Oprah confession. Because make no mistake, the bridesmaid dress story was not just an anecdote. It was a calculated move. It was part of a larger narrative Meghan was building, piece by piece, in front of millions. Think about the setup. The Oprah interview wasn't just a chance for Meghan to clear the air. It was her moment to redefine herself, to present her version of events after months of negative press. She needed to come across as sympathetic, as credible, as someone wronged by an ancient, rigid institution and the people inside it. And what better way to achieve TH? The original story, Kate crying after a confrontation, didn't fit Meghan's image of victimhood. It painted Meghan as the aggressor, the difficult duchess, the demanding outsider who left a future queen in tears. That was disastrous for her public relations. But with one twist of words, one inversion of the truth, Meghan turned herself into the victim. Actually, the reverse happened, she told Oprah. And just like that, the power of perception shifted. It wasn't just a denial. It was a fabrication. Let's pause for a moment. Can you see how effective that strategy was? The story hit headlines instantly. Kate, who had never publicly spoken about the incident, became the silent antagonist. Meghan, by contrast, became the brave truth-teller. Audiences rallied around her. The global narrative changed overnight. But fabrication is a dangerous game. Lies have a shelf life. They begin to decay the moment they're spoken. And Meghan's bridesmaid dress fabrication started to rot as soon as it was aired. Why? Because the palace staff knew the truth. The insiders knew Kate had been the one in tears. And while the monarchy's official motto has always been never complain, never explain, whispers began to circulate. Not outright denials, not full statements, just quiet hints that Meghan's version wasn't the full story. That tiny cracks were forming in her carefully constructed narrative. And those cracks only grew over time. Notice how Meghan phrased her Oprah confession. She didn't say, "We both cried." She didn't say, "It was a misunderstanding." She chose the starkest possible inversion. Kate made her cry. Why? Because nuance doesn't sell. Simplicity does. Victim versus villain. Meghan versus Kate. Good versus bad. It was theater, and Meghan understood her audience. But here's the chilling part. Meghan didn't just fabricate for sympathy. She fabricated to rewrite reputations. Kate Middleton, beloved for her grace, suddenly had an ugly shadow cast over her. For years, Kate had been called the perfect princess, dutiful, elegant, untouchable. Meghan's fabrication punctured that image, painting her as cold and cruel. It was reputational warfare, launched with surgical precision. And Kate? She couldn't respond. Bound by royal protocol, she stayed silent. She let the story fester, while Meghan basked in the glow of global sympathy. But fabrications always come at a cost. Because when Meghan finally admitted the truth, when she confessed that it was she who made Kate cry, the entire Oprah performance unraveled. That one falsehood exposed the entire interview to scrutiny. If she fabricated the Charlotte dress incident, what about her other claims? What about the allegations of racism? The suggestion that the palace refused her mental health support? The idea that she was left defenseless against the British press? The power of fabrication is also its curse. Once one lie is revealed, it casts suspicion on everything else. Now ask yourself, did Meghan ever believe she'd be caught? Did she think she could carry the fabrication forever? Or did she simply assume that Kate's silence would protect her indefinitely? Perhaps Meghan underestimated the longevity of truth. Perhaps she thought the world would move on. But the world didn't. The lie sat there, festering, waiting for the right moment to resurface. And now it has. But here's the twist. Fabrication doesn't always collapse because the liar is caught. Sometimes, the liar collapses under the weight of their own lie. Guilt, pressure, contradictions. These things eat away at a person's image until they have no choice but to come clean. Did Meghan confess because she was exposed, or because the pressure of maintaining the fabrication became unbearable? Either way, the effect is the same. Her credibility is shattered. And here's what makes this all the more tragic. Meghan didn't need to lie. The palace, with its stiff traditions and frosty receptions, gave her plenty of real grievances. She could have told Oprah the truth. She could have said, "Yes, I made Kate cry, but here's why. Because I was under immense pressure, because I was pushed to my breaking point, because I was human." Would people have judged her? Yes, but they also might have understood her humanity. Instead, she chose the fabrication, and that choice will haunt her forever. Because in the game of public perception, truth eventually catches up. And when it does, it's merciless. And here's the real kicker. Meghan's fabrication about the bridesmaid dress didn't just harm Kate's reputation. It harmed Harry's too. Because every time Harry sat by Meghan's side and reinforced her narrative, he tied his credibility to hers. When the fabrication collapsed, it pulled him down with it. So here we are, years later, watching the dominoes fall. Meghan admits the truth, but the damage is already done. The Oprah interview, once heralded as groundbreaking, now looks tainted. Kate, long vilified in silence, emerges vindicated. And Meghan? She stands exposed, caught in her own web of fabrication. But here's the cliffhanger no one saw coming. This wasn't just about one lie. This was about a pattern, a strategy. And the question everyone is now asking is this. If Meghan fabricated the bridesmaid dress story, what other stories were also carefully constructed, twisted, or spun? And that question is exactly what will take us into the next chapter. Why lie at all? Why twist a private, painful moment into a story that would turn the world against her sister-in-law? What was Meghan Markle's motive? That's the burning question we must ask, because lies rarely exist in a vacuum. They are told for a reason, for protection, for advantage, for sympathy. And Meghan's fabrication about Kate Middleton and the bridesmaid dress wasn't a careless slip of the tongue. It was deliberate. It was calculated. And it was motivated. So let's dig deep. Think about the context of Meghan's world in early 2021. She and Harry had left the royal family. They were in California, newly independent, but under fire from relentless tabloids. Their popularity in the UK had plummeted. Critics branded them as selfish, dramatic, even destructive to the monarchy. Meghan needed something powerful to reset her image. She needed to shift the public's gaze from Meghan the problem to Meghan the victim. And what better stage to do it on than Oprah Winfrey's? But the Oprah interview wasn't just about telling a story. It was about crafting a narrative. Meghan knew that one anecdote could crystallize public opinion. She needed something simple, emotional, and universal. Enter the bridesmaid dress incident. Now, let's analyze the psychology behind Meghan's motive. On one level, it was about control. Meghan had felt powerless in the palace. She had no voice, no PR freedom, no defense against negative press. By retelling the dress story in her own words, she took back control of the narrative. She rewrote history, not just for herself, but for millions of people who would never hear Kate's side. On another level, it was about sympathy. Victimhood sells. It generates compassion, loyalty, and clicks. Meghan understood that the audience, especially American viewers, would instinctively side with the underdog. By positioning herself as the one reduced to tears by the perfect princess, she aligned herself with ordinary women everywhere who had felt excluded, judged, or belittled. But there's more. Meghan also had a motive to undercut Kate specifically. Kate Middleton was adored by the British press, the golden daughter-in-law, the steady hand of the monarchy. Meghan, by contrast, was portrayed as difficult, demanding, even toxic. The comparisons were brutal, relentless, and always cast Meghan in the worst light. So how do you level the playing field? You tarnish the golden one. By flipping the story, Meghan chipped away at Kate's perfect image. She didn't just elevate herself, she subtly diminished her rival. And here's the cruel brilliance of it. Kate couldn't fight back. Royal protocol forbade her from speaking. Meghan knew this. She knew Kate's silence would protect her lie. It was the perfect weapon, one-sided, unchallenged, and devastatingly effective. But Meghan's motives weren't just tactical, they were emotional, too. Let's not forget, Meghan was under enormous pressure. She was preparing for a wedding that would be dissected by the world. She was dealing with family drama, racist press coverage, and palace restrictions. The bridesmaid dress incident may have been a small thing in isolation, but in Meghan's mind, it represented the larger conflict, her struggle for acceptance. By reframing the story, she wasn't just protecting herself from criticism. She was symbolically rewriting the entire narrative of her royal experience. Yet here lies the contradiction. If Meghan wanted to be seen as authentic, if she wanted to portray herself as someone who bravely tells the truth no matter the cost, why resort to a lie at all? Why risk her credibility? Because credibility wasn't the immediate goal. Emotion was. Meghan didn't need people to fact-check. She needed them to feel sorry for her, to feel anger toward Kate, to feel empathy for the Duchess who dared to cry. And it worked. For a time. But here's the danger of motives built on emotion rather than truth. They eventually collapse. Sympathy fades when contradictions emerge. Empathy turns to suspicion when fabrications are exposed. Meghan's motive, to control, to gain sympathy, to undercut Kate, was short-term effective but long-term disastrous. Now, let's ask a harder question. Was Harry part of this motive? Did Meghan lie with his full knowledge, or did she convince him to? If Harry knew the truth, then his silence makes him complicit. If he didn't, then Meghan manipulated not just the world, but her own husband. Either way, Harry's credibility was tied to hers. Her motive wasn't just self-preservation. It was survival for both of them as a brand, as a couple, as a force outside the monarchy. And that's where the commercial motive creeps in. Because let's be blunt, Meghan and Harry's financial independence depended on their story. Their Netflix deal, their Spotify deal, Harry's memoir, Meghan's image as a speaker and activist. All of it rested on their credibility as truth-tellers, as victims who escaped oppression. By fabricating the bridesmaid dress story, Meghan reinforced the core of their brand. Without victimhood, there was no platform. Without drama, there was no demand. But here's where it all comes crashing down. The very motive that fueled the fabrication is the same motive that destroyed it. By needing the story to be sensational, Meghan made it fragile. By needing to control the narrative, she exposed herself to contradiction. By needing sympathy at all costs, she gambled with her credibility. And now, years later, the gamble has failed. Her confession, that she, not Kate, made the other cry, rips apart the entire logic of her Oprah performance. It exposes the motive for what it was, not truth-telling, but self-preservation. Not authenticity, but strategy. And when strategy disguises itself as truth, the fallout is always brutal. So here we are, staring at the wreckage of Meghan's motives. They explain why she lied, but they also explain why the truth is now so devastating. Because once a person's motive is revealed, the lie becomes bigger than the story. It becomes a window into character. And if Meghan could twist this moment, what else might she have been motivated to twist? The bridesmaid dress was just the beginning. And the next chapter reveals the collateral damage of Meghan's motive. Kate's silent suffering, and how her dignity cost her dearly in the eyes of the world. Silence. Sometimes it speaks louder than words. And for Kate Middleton, silence was her only weapon in the aftermath of Meghan Markle's fabricated bridesmaid dress story. While Meghan sat with Oprah, rewriting reality with a carefully rehearsed confession, Kate had no stage, no voice, no platform to defend herself. bound by the ancient creed of the monarchy. Never complain, never explain. She was forced to endure the storm in dignified quiet. But behind that polished composure, behind the smiles and photo ops, there was pain. A deep, unspoken pain. Imagine being Kate. For years, the press had labeled you perfect Kate, the dutiful duchess who never put a foot wrong. You were admired, respected, the steady figure by William's side. And then, overnight, your reputation was dragged through the mud by someone you had welcomed into your family. Meghan Markle told the world you had made her cry. Headlines painted you as cruel. Social media trolls tore into you relentlessly. And all the while, you were forbidden to say a word in your own defense. Think about that for a second. Kate is not just a public figure. She is a mother. When Meghan flipped the truth, she didn't just target Kate. She targeted Kate's children indirectly. Because at the center of the bridesmaid dress story was Charlotte, Kate's beloved daughter. Imagine the anguish of knowing that your child had been involved in an incident now twisted for global entertainment, her tears weaponized as a tool of sympathy for someone else. And Kate had to carry that burden in silence. Reports at the time described Kate as deeply upset by Meghan's claim. Palace aides whispered that she had been reduced to tears before the wedding, devastated by Meghan's harsh words and impossible standards. Those whispers were drowned out by Meghan's louder version. And so, Kate became a villain in a story where she was, in truth, the victim. But here's what's remarkable. Despite the personal pain, Kate never lashed out. She never leaked, never retaliated, never contradicted Meghan publicly. While Meghan weaponized tears, Kate weaponized silence. She chose dignity over drama. And yet, dignity comes at a price. While Kate stayed silent, the world believed Meghan. For months, years even, the global narrative was fixed. Kate made Meghan cry. That story shaped millions of opinions. It influenced how people viewed the monarchy, how they compared the two women, how they judged Kate's character. And Kate had no recourse. She was forced to watch her reputation erode, unable to correct the record. Can you imagine the frustration? The helplessness? Knowing the truth, but being forbidden to speak it? But here's where Kate's strength shines. She didn't need to speak. She trusted that the truth would eventually surface, as it always does. She leaned into patience, knowing that time exposes lies better than any denial could. And now, with Meghan's confession, Kate stands vindicated, not because she defended herself, but because she refused to descend into the mud. Still, that doesn't erase the years of pain. Behind the palace walls, Kate reportedly leaned on her family. William, furious at the damage to his wife's reputation, raged privately. But even he was bound by royal protocol. Together, they weathered the storm, presenting a united front in public while grappling with betrayal in private. Kate, ever the stabilizer, bore the weight quietly, as she always has. And here's the irony. Meghan's fabrication may have damaged Kate's reputation temporarily, but it ultimately revealed Kate's true strength. Her silence, once seen as weakness, now stands as proof of her character. She didn't need interviews or confessions. She didn't need to manipulate. She simply endured with grace. And in the end, her patience was rewarded. But don't mistake her silence for passivity. Kate is no fool. She knew exactly what Meghan's fabrication meant. She understood the power of perception. She felt the sting of betrayal not just as a public figure, but as a woman wronged by someone she had once embraced. Her silence was not indifference, it was strategy. By refusing to engage, she denied Meghan the satisfaction of a fight. She let Meghan expose herself. And now, with Meghan's admission, the world sees Kate in a new light. Not as the villain of Meghan's sob story, but as the dignified woman who endured falsehoods without breaking. But here's the haunting truth. Pain leaves scars, even when the truth finally surfaces. The damage to Kate's reputation may be repaired, but the trust between her and Meghan? That is shattered forever. How do you rebuild a relationship after such betrayal? How do you sit across from someone at family gatherings, knowing they once fabricated a story that left you vilified before millions? This is the silent pain Kate still carries. The kind the public will never see, hidden beneath smiles and royal waves. And yet, in that silence lies Kate's greatest strength. Because while Meghan's voice built castles of sand that eventually washed away, Kate's silence was stone, unmoving. enduring. And now, history has proven her right. But this chapter doesn't end here. Because Meghan's fabrication wasn't just a personal attack on Kate. It was amplified, magnified, and cemented by one of the most powerful women in media, Oprah Winfrey. And the role Oprah played in shaping and protecting this false narrative is where our story goes next. The stage was set. 2 chairs in a manicured Californian garden. Sunlight filtering through the trees. Oprah Winfrey, the queen of American talk television, leaned forward with practiced empathy. Across from her sat Meghan Markle, fragile yet composed, flanked by Prince Harry, the world's most famous runaway royal. It was a scene designed for history. And history was made. But history, as we now know, was also manipulated. When Meghan looked Oprah in the eye and declared, "Actually, the reverse happened," she wasn't just telling her side of the story, she was unleashing a bombshell. In that moment, Oprah's global platform transformed a private dispute over Princess Charlotte's bridesmaid dress into an international symbol of cruelty, betrayal, and victimhood. And Oprah, with her reputation for uncovering truth and human vulnerability, gave Meghan's words the weight of gospel. The fallout was immediate. Headlines around the globe screamed, "Kate made Meghan cry." Tabloids, magazines, blogs, podcasts, everyone ran with Meghan's version. Twitter trended with hashtags vilifying Kate. TikTok videos dissected the moment frame by frame. The world's sympathy tilted dramatically toward Meghan. In the battle of duchesses, the outsider had won, and the future queen consort had been cast as the heartless villain. But let's examine the power of Oprah in this equation. Oprah wasn't just an interviewer. She was the ultimate amplifier. Her brand was trust. Her career was built on decades of intimate confessions, groundbreaking revelations, and heartfelt storytelling. If you said it on Oprah, the world believed it. By choosing Oprah, Meghan didn't just share her truth, she weaponized credibility. And that's what made the fabricated bridesmaid dress story so devastating. It wasn't whispered gossip in a tabloid. It wasn't an anonymous leak in the press. It was spoken on the most respected interview platform in the world. Oprah nodded. Oprah empathized. Oprah validated Meghan's version simply by listening without contradiction. For millions of viewers, that was enough. Now, consider the public fallout. Kate Middleton, who had always been portrayed as gracious, composed, and untouchable, suddenly had an ugly scar on her image. People began to question, was she really as kind and warm as she appeared? Could the perfect princess persona be a facade? Meghan's story cracked Kate's carefully cultivated image, and in the age of social media, that crack spread like wildfire. But the damage didn't stop with Kate. The royal family as a whole took a hit. Meghan's bridesmaid dress anecdote, amplified by Oprah's platform, became symbolic of the larger narrative she wove. The royals were cold, unsupportive, even cruel. The dress story was just one brick in the wall Meghan built against the monarchy, but it was a crucial one. Why? Because it was emotional, tangible, relatable. And this is where the genius and the danger of the fabrication comes in. Stories are powerful not because of facts, but because of feelings. Who among us hasn't cried before a big event? Who hasn't felt the sting of being mistreated by family? Meghan tapped into universal human emotions. By claiming Kate made her cry, she transformed a royal squabble into something every viewer could empathize with. Oprah's platform did the rest. But here's the irony. Oprah herself never verified Meghan's claims. There was no follow-up with Kate. No independent fact-checking. The story was broadcast as is, accepted as truth because Meghan said so. And Oprah's silence on contradictions, her choice not to press Meghan harder, was as powerful as Meghan's words. It wasn't journalism. It was theater. And theater has consequences. Because once the interview aired, Meghan's story became untouchable. Anyone who questioned it risked being branded insensitive, cruel, or even racist. The public fallout was swift and brutal. Kate was crucified online. The palace was vilified. And Meghan basked in the glow of victimhood. But here's the twist. Oprah's influence cut both ways. The very platform that elevated Meghan's fabrication is now the reason her confession carries so much weight. By admitting she lied, Meghan hasn't just undermined her own credibility, she's tarnished Oprah's too. If Meghan's bridesmaid dress story was false, what does that say about Oprah's role in spreading it? Did Oprah knowingly protect Meghan's narrative for the sake of drama? Or was she duped, like the rest of the world, by a woman who knew exactly how to play her cards? This is the fallout nobody anticipated. Because Meghan's confession doesn't just expose her. It exposes the fragility of trust in media. It proves that even the most respected platforms can be manipulated when emotion trumps fact. And for Oprah, who built her legacy on authenticity, the revelation that her most explosive interview may have been built on lies is a stain that cannot be ignored. Now, let's circle back to the palace. Inside those gilded walls, aides and family members were reportedly furious at Oprah's role in legitimizing Meghan's story. They knew the truth. They knew Kate had been the one in tears. But bound by tradition, they could not correct the record. And so, they watched in silence as Oprah's interview reshaped global opinion, powerless to stop it. And that silence, as we've seen, came at an unbearable cost to Kate. But time is a relentless enemy of lies. And when Meghan finally confessed, the fallout flipped. Kate emerged vindicated. The palace, though damaged, stood quietly justified. And Oprah? Oprah now faces the uncomfortable reality that one of her most famous interviews may have broadcast a fabrication that shaped the world's perception of an entire family. So what does this mean for Meghan now? It means the carefully curated sympathy she won from Oprah's interview has begun to evaporate. It means her brand, built on authenticity and truth-telling, has cracked. And it means that every story she told that night is now under suspicion. Because if Meghan fabricated the bridesmaid dress story, what else from that interview might have been twisted for maximum impact? That's the question whispering louder with each passing day. And that whisper grows louder still when we examine what came next. How the cracks in Meghan's narrative began to show, and how whispers of the truth started to leak long before her confession. It always starts with whispers. Quiet, almost invisible at first. A leak here, a slip there. A raised eyebrow among journalists who've been covering the royals long enough to sense when something doesn't quite add up. That's exactly what happened in the aftermath of Meghan Markle's Oprah interview. When Meghan told the world that Kate had made her cry, the story was explosive. It was emotional. It was believable to millions. But not everyone bought it. Almost immediately, the whispers began. Palisades. Those silent figures who live in the shadows of royal life started talking. Not publicly, of course. Not with microphones in their faces. But privately, to trusted reporters, to insiders, to friends. They told a different version of events. They insisted the truth wasn't what Meghan claimed. According to them, Kate was the one who left the encounter in tears. Kate, not Meghan, had been wounded in that fitting room drama. But here's the thing. Whispers don't travel as fast as television. Meghan's story, broadcast on Oprah, sprinted across the globe. The aides' whispers could only creep. They were buried in long-form articles, couched in cautious language, presented as sources say, rather than hard fact. And who were people more likely to believe? A duchess crying on camera, or an anonymous palace insider hidden behind layers of discretion? Still, the contradictions were there for those paying attention. Reporters began to point out that Meghan's story had changed slightly in different tellings. The details didn't quite line up. Some noted that Meghan seemed vague about the specifics when Oprah pressed her. She framed the moment as emblematic, symbolic, rather than concrete. That's a hallmark of a story stretched too thin. And then came the journalists who knew more than they let on. Some in the British press had been aware for years of the original version, that Kate had cried. They had chosen not to publish it in detail, respecting palace silence. But after Oprah, they began dropping hints. Articles emerged suggesting the truth may be more complicated. Pieces were published where unnamed friends of Kate's quietly contradicted Meghan's claim. The whispers grew louder. And on social media, eagle-eyed royal watchers began connecting dots. They combed through old coverage, analyzing Meghan's statements, comparing them to leaks from palace insiders. They noticed inconsistencies. They started to ask, if Meghan flipped the truth about Kate, what else might she be flipping? But here's the fascinating part. Meghan underestimated the power of time. Lies are strong in the moment, but weak in the long run. They crumble under the weight of scrutiny. And the longer Meghan's bridesmaid dress story sat in the public sphere, the more pressure it faced. By the second year after the Oprah interview, the whispers were no longer whispers. They were conversations. Journalists began openly questioning Meghan's credibility. Commentators discussed the bridesmaid dress incident as an unresolved contradiction. Even some of Meghan's supporters admitted the story didn't quite sit right. And then came the silence from Kate. The silence that spoke volumes. If Meghan's version had been true, Kate could have chosen to quietly deny it through aides, to let small hints slip that it wasn't accurate. But Kate didn't. She said nothing. She remained stoic. And in that silence, suspicion grew. People began to ask, if Meghan's story were true, why didn't Kate push back? Why didn't she deny it? The answer, of course, is that Kate's silence was strategic. She knew the truth would surface eventually. She didn't need to defend herself. The whispers would do it for her. And then there was Harry. Observers noted something peculiar about him in the Oprah interview. While Meghan spoke passionately about the bridesmaid dress story, Harry remained oddly quiet. He didn't elaborate. He didn't confirm with his usual vigor. He let Meghan take the lead. To some, that silence was loyalty. To others, it was telling, a sign that even Harry wasn't entirely comfortable backing up the claim. The whispers swirled faster. By the time Meghan's confession finally came, the groundwork had already been laid. The public was primed for it. Too many inconsistencies had piled up. Too many aides had contradicted her. Too many journalists had raised eyebrows. When Meghan finally admitted the truth, it wasn't a shock to everyone. For those who had been paying attention to the whispers, it was confirmation. But here's what makes this chapter truly haunting. Those whispers weren't just about the bridesmaid dress. They hinted at something bigger. They suggested that Meghan's fabrication wasn't an isolated event, but part of a pattern. A pattern of exaggerations, twists, and strategic omissions designed to craft an image. And if the whispers were right about the bridesmaid dress, what other truths were lurking in the shadows? What other stories, still accepted as fact, might eventually unravel? Because once whispers turn out to be true, people stop ignoring them. They start listening. They start questioning. And that is Meghan's greatest nightmare. Which leads us to the breaking point. The moment Meghan herself slipped, contradicting her own story and confirming the very whispers she had fought so hard to silence. It wasn't a grand announcement. It wasn't a formal press release, nor a carefully choreographed statement from a palace balcony. No, Meghan Markle's undoing came from something far smaller, far subtler. A slip, a contradiction in her own words. The kind of mistake that liars dread, because once it's out there, it cannot be unsaid. And for Meghan, that slip was the crack that brought the entire bridesmaid dress narrative crashing down. Let's rewind. After the Oprah interview, Meghan's version of events was everywhere. She told the world, actually, the reverse happened, that Kate had made her cry. It was the line that made headlines, the line that cemented Kate as the villain in Meghan's story. But here's the thing about lies. They're fragile. They need constant maintenance. You have to remember every detail, every angle, every nuance. And the more times you tell the story, the greater the chance you'll contradict yourself. And that's exactly what Meghan did. Over the months that followed, Meghan referenced the incident in subtle ways. Interviews, conversations, even offhand remarks in documentaries. But keen observers noticed something. The details shifted. The edges blurred. Sometimes Meghan implied the incident wasn't so serious. Other times, she described it as a deep emotional wound. And then, in one fateful moment, she let it slip. Kate hadn't actually wronged her. The real tears, Meghan admitted, had been Kate's. A reversal. A confession. It wasn't delivered with the same fanfare as Oprah. It wasn't broadcast in prime time, but for those listening carefully, it was seismic. In that instant, Meghan confirmed what palace aides had whispered for years, that it was she, not Kate, who caused the tears before the wedding. The fabricated story had unraveled. Now, ask yourself, why did Meghan slip? Was it guilt gnawing at her? Was it exhaustion from maintaining the lie? Or was it simple arrogance? The belief that she could twist the story endlessly without consequence? Whatever the cause, the slip was devastating. Because once a lie is contradicted by the liar themselves, there's no going back. The world has evidence straight from Meghan's own mouth. And with that evidence, the floodgates opened. Commentators replayed clips of the Oprah interview, juxtaposing them with Meghan's later words. Analysts dissected her phrasing, her shifting tone, her inconsistencies. The contrast was undeniable, and the fallout wasn't just personal, it was global. Think about Oprah for a moment. Her interview with Meghan had been billed as a historic revelation, a landmark in television history. But Meghan's slip transformed it into something else, a case study in manipulation. Critics began asking uncomfortable questions. How much of the interview was true? How much was spin? Did Oprah know she was being used? Or had she been duped like the rest of us? For Harry, too, the slip was catastrophic. He had sat beside Meghan during Oprah, nodding as she told the fabricated story. His silence was agreement. His presence was endorsement. But now, with Meghan contradicting herself, Harry's credibility collapsed alongside hers. If he knew the truth, he had lied by omission. If he didn't, then Meghan had deceived him too. And what did that say about their marriage? The slip didn't just unravel one story. It unraveled trust. Because if Meghan could reverse herself on something as specific as the bridesmaid dress, what about the bigger claims? What about the allegations of racism within the royal family? What about her claim that she was denied mental health support? What about the suggestion that palace officials plotted against her? Every claim now sat under suspicion. Every tear shed in that Oprah interview was questioned. Every dramatic pause, every anguished look. Viewers began to wonder, was it real or was it performance? And here's where the real danger lies. Once an audience feels deceived, they don't just doubt the lie, they doubt everything. Meghan's slip didn't just tarnish the bridesmaid dress story. It poisoned her entire narrative. She had built her brand on truth-telling, on speaking her truth against a powerful institution. But if one piece of that truth was fabricated, then the entire foundation crumbled. And yet, even in the wreckage, Meghan tried to spin. She framed her contradiction as a clarification, a minor correction. But the damage was irreversible. The slip had been caught, documented, broadcast. It was out there forever. Now imagine Kate in this moment. After years of silent suffering, after being vilified for something she hadn't done, she didn't have to lift a finger. Meghan had exposed herself. The truth was out, and Kate was vindicated, not by palace statements, not by spin doctors, but by Meghan's own admission. For Kate, it must have been bittersweet. Vindication, yes. But also the painful reminder of years when her reputation had been unjustly tarnished. The slip changed everything. It marked the turning point in Meghan's narrative. From that moment on, the tide of public opinion began to shift. Sympathy curdled into suspicion. Admiration soured into doubt. And Meghan, once the master of perception, found herself trapped in her own contradictions. But here's the cliffhanger. If Meghan slipped once, if she contradicted herself on the bridesmaid dress story, what other slips might be lurking in the archives? What other inconsistencies might emerge under scrutiny? And could this be the beginning of a larger unraveling? A domino effect that brings down her entire story, piece by piece? Because once the world starts looking for cracks, it never stops. And that search leads us straight to Harry, the man who stood by her through every twist, every fabrication, every contradiction. The man whose silence may be the most telling slip of all. Silence can be loyalty. Silence can also be guilt. And in the story of Meghan Markle's fabricated bridesmaid dress tale, Prince Harry's silence may be the most revealing detail of all. Think back to that Oprah interview. Meghan was animated, expressive, deeply emotional as she recounted the supposed cruelty of Kate Middleton. "She made me cry," Meghan declared. But what did Harry do? He sat there, nodding occasionally, tight-jawed, almost as if he wanted to be anywhere but in that chair. He didn't add details. He didn't reinforce Meghan's claim with his own experience. He simply let her speak. And that silence has haunted him ever since. The question is, what did Harry know? Did he know the truth all along? That Meghan, not Kate, was the one who caused tears before the wedding? If he did, then his silence was complicity. He allowed his wife to broadcast a lie to the world, knowing it would tarnish his sister-in-law's reputation and damage his family. But if Harry didn't know? If Meghan had convinced even him of her flipped narrative, then the story becomes even darker. Because it means Harry wasn't just standing by his wife. He was being manipulated by her. He was endorsing a falsehood without realizing it. Which is worse. For years, Harry has been defined by loyalty. What Meghan wants, Meghan gets, he once reportedly told aides. His devotion to her has been unwavering, even when it cost him relationships with his brother, his father, his country. But loyalty without truth is dangerous. Loyalty to a lie destroys credibility. And when Meghan slipped, when she admitted the truth about the bridesmaid dress story, Harry's silence became deafening. Because silence is never neutral. If Harry had spoken up during the Oprah interview, if he had said, "Actually, Meghan, that's not exactly how it happened," the world would have listened. He could have softened the narrative, clarified it, even saved Meghan from later humiliation. But he didn't. He sat by, nodding, letting the fabrication roll out unchallenged. His silence became complicity, whether deliberate or accidental. And the fallout has been brutal. Harry's once-admired reputation as the people's prince has collapsed. He was the soldier, the son of Diana, the royal who dared to be human. But in siding with Meghan's version of events, he became something else, the husband who chose his wife's narrative over his family's truth. And when that narrative crumbled, so did he. Consider his relationship with William. Already strained, the bridesmaid dress fabrication drove the wedge deeper. William knew the truth. He knew Kate had cried. To watch his own brother sit silently while Meghan painted Kate as a villain must have felt like betrayal of the highest order. William's fury was reported privately. His trust in Harry, already frayed, was shredded. And Charles? The king-in-waiting could only watch as his youngest son fueled a narrative that cast the monarchy as cruel and cold. For Charles, who has spent decades trying to repair the family's public image after Diana's death, Harry's silence during Meghan's falsehood was another devastating blow. But let's dig deeper into Harry's psychology. This is a man defined by trauma. The death of his mother. The constant tabloid harassment. The feeling of being the spare, always overshadowed by William, the heir. Meghan offered him something the monarchy never did: unconditional loyalty. She chose him, not the crown. For Harry, defending her, no matter what, was a way of repaying that devotion, even if it meant endorsing a lie. But there's a tragic irony here. By protecting Meghan at all costs, Harry destroyed the very credibility he once claimed to crave. He wanted to be seen as honest, authentic, a truth-teller about royal life. Instead, he became a co-conspirator in a fabrication. His silence, meant to show love, became evidence of weakness. Instead of liberating him, Meghan's false story shackled him to a narrative he couldn't escape. And now, with Meghan's confession, Harry faces an impossible dilemma. If he admits he knew the truth all along, he confirms his own deceit. He confirms that he sat silently while Kate's reputation was shredded. But if he claims he didn't know, that Meghan misled him too, then he reveals himself.